Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is your brother in Al Islam and your brother in humanity, Brother Charles Shabazz of Shabazz Islamic Ministries. I did mention yesterday that sometime during the month of Ramadan, I do want to give and extend the special greeting of Ramadan Mubarak to all who are fasting during the beautiful month of Ramadan. I did share that I wanted to share some book reviews pertaining that's Islamically related. So the book that I want to share, this is a very old book. This is called The Killing of the Imam, and it's called The Killing of the Imam Defied by Courage and Faith. And this was authored by two men, Barney Desai and Cardiff Marney. And there was a foreword by Sir Dinglefoot. But anyway, what this book was about, it was about an imam in South Africa by the name of Al-Hajj Abdullah Harun. May Allah have mercy on him and grant him Jannah. This book, I actually bought it used. Here, if you could see the inside here, I bought this used from Amazon. It's here it's to like Patrick Denny from London, February 1980. So this is quite interesting. The two I know, the Barney Desai was an anti-apartheid activist in South Africa, who actually had to leave for the UK, leave for England in exile because of his activities against apartheid. Here's like a short little biographical sketch of these two authors. It says here, Barney Desai was born in Johannesburg in 1932. He is a former president of the South African Colored People's Congress. I'll get into what color it is in a few moments. He was elected Cape Town City Councilor, but was unable to take his seat because of a banning order which forbade him to be in a gathering of more than one person. He was gallowed during the 1960 quote-unquote state of emergency. He escaped from South Africa in 1963 while on trial for breaking his banning order. He is now a barrister, which is what they call attorneys over in the UK. He is now a barrister and lives in London with his wife and children. Here, Cardiff Marney was born in Cape Town in 1934. He was a full-time officer of the Union of Black Municipal Workers in Cape Town before he was banned. And like Barney Desai, he formerly held office in the South African Colored People's Congress. He too was gallowed and spent 127 days in solitary confinement. Since 1964, he has lived with his family in exile in England. So both of these men were exiled for their stance against the apartheid regime in South Africa. Now, you might be curious, what is colored? Now, not too long ago, a few decades ago, in our country, here in the United States, we had Jim Crow apartheid in the United States, especially down south. But there were Jim Crow policies even outside of the southern United States in those days. Even here in Indianapolis, there were Jim Crow policies that were enforced. There were certain restaurants you can't even eat. But, and you know, they would have signs. One would say white and the other would say colored. And usually when they use the word colored here in the United States, they're talking about African Americans. But they could also talk about people of color in general and not just African Americans. Now in South Africa, colored people are mixed race people, or people who we call multiracial or biracial, mixed, or mulatto. That's that's who the colored people are. Of course, the black Africans, the native Africans, they're just called black, and Asians are called Asians, and of course, white are called white. But after the fall of apartheid, even though they still have these same ethnic classifications there, not just the native Africans, who are certainly called black, but even the coloreds and the Asians are also considered black people in South Africa. Now, let's actually get into the story here. And this book was written back in 1978. So this is a very old book. I don't know. I don't know as to whether or not these authors are still living. I think one of them, at least one of them, have passed away, if not both of them, since then. But again, this was about an imam named Imam Abdullah Harun, and he was an imam. He also was considered a colored South African. And Islam is actually very prevalent in the colored community in South Africa, as well as the Asian community. There's even a growing number of native Africans who, or native indigenous people of South Africa, who are embracing Islam, alhamdulillah. Even some Caucasians, some Afrikaners and British, they're embracing Islam. And Abdullah Harun was born in 1924 in the Cape Town area of South Africa. And mind you, Cape Town is actually, was, and probably still is, a predominantly colored city. At least they have a very large population of the colored community in that country. He was raised Muslim. He was able to make Hajj. I believe he made Hajj during his youth. And he was very studious. He was actually very serious about his deen early in life. Was extremely brilliant as a student. He was also very athletic. His favorite sport was rugby, which was and still is a popular sport in South Africa. And he got married, had a few children, and he was a very young man, a very young imam, who the young Muslims looked up to. And he understood that, he understood the injustice that he and his people and others were facing in South Africa at that time. He lived in an area where, due to a policy where the South African government passed laws to remove non-European people out of a certain areas so they can take land only for the European South Africans. And he understood that Muslims need to be at the forefront on these matters. He understood the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam very well, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is hadith 34, where he states that if you see an evil, you correct it with your hands. If you cannot correct it with your hands, then speak out against it. And if you cannot speak out against it, then at least disagree in your soul. And that is the weakest of faith. He understood that. And also he understood what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in his last sermon, where he says that there is no superiority of the Arab over the non-Arab, nor the white over the black. It is only those who demonstrate piety which distinguishes them in terms of being superior to others. And of course, there's an ayat in the Quran in Surah 49, ayat 13, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states that he created and divided us into nations and tribes so that we would know one another. Lita'arafu. That's what it means, to get to know one another and not despise one another. So Imam Al-Hajj Harun understood this very well. And he did his utmost to put this into practice, to put Islam into practice, based on the Quran and the Sunnah. And he was encouraging Muslims to do the same. However, what was unfortunate was the National Shura Board, actually even under oppressive circumstances, the Muslim community actually had a National Shura which governed the entire Muslim community all over the country. But these so-called imams, these so-called members of the Shura, were actually collaborators of the apartheid government. And basically, they opposed Imam Harun in terms of engaging the Muslim community against apartheid. And their excuse was that the South African government allowed them to build masajids, allowed them to build mosques, allowed them to build cemeteries and bury their dead. And they felt because of that, there was no need to fight them. And so basically, these leaders were scared. They were chicken-hearted. They were not true Muslims to begin with, in terms of their practice. But Imam Abdullah Harun brought Islam to the South African people and challenged the apartheid government to change their ways. And according to the South African government, Imam Harun was a dangerous man, like late President Nelson Mandela, Stephen Biko, Oliver Tambo Watasisulu, Reverend Desmond Tutu, all these leaders, Joe Slovo, all these people. So just to fast forward, because of his activities, he was arrested by the South African police, and he was taken to the police station in Cape Town, was beaten, and it got to the point where, as a result of the brutality that the South African police had orchestrated against him, that he died as a result of those injuries. Now, you notice on the front cover here, the killing of the Imam, you notice is a picture of a man falling down the stairs. And the reason why you show that was because, according to official or legal reports from the South African Police Department, they stated that Imam Abdullah Haroon died as a result of a fall down the stairs. I encourage you to listen to an interview by Brother Hakeem Muhammad of the Black Muslim Network. I believe that's the name of the group that he's associated with. He's an attorney. He actually interviewed the grandson of Imam Abdullah Haroon. And inshallah, I will put a link of that interview. So that way, from my video, you can watch that, inshallah. But anyway, according to his grandson, there were really no flights of stairs in that precinct where Imam Haroon was killed. In fact, according to his grandson, there were only 2 steps. That was the extent of the stairs in that station. And so, of course, they said these words just to cover their butts, right? To cover their backside. Now, there's a movie that I do encourage you to watch that came out years ago. I believe it was back in 1987, called Cry Freedom. And this was about a European South African journalist named Donald James Woods, who eventually was able to lead his family to escape South Africa and move to the UK because of his opposition to apartheid. It was played by an American actor named Kevin Kline. At first, I thought Kevin Kline was a British actor because he used that accent so well. But when I learned about him, I saw that he was actually from St. Louis. And then also, one of the major people in that movie was a man named Stephen Biko, who I mentioned minutes ago. And Denzel Washington played Stephen Biko, who was, like everybody else, including Imam Haroon, was brutalized and murdered under police custody. If you watch the end of the movie, if you watch the credits of Cry Freedom, they actually have a list of people who died, who actually were murdered by the South African government. But you would see all these reports, all these names, and the official cause of death. They would say one so and so died from a fall. So and so died from an asthma attack. So and so died from committing suicide. Which are blatant lies, right? And that's what they were showing, how the South African government lied in terms of how these people passed away. But I encourage you to buy this book. You can still get this book on Amazon or wherever. You probably look at Books A Million. I don't know if they have that, or Barnes and Noble, but The Killing of the Imam is an excellent book. If you have any questions, again, feel free to comment or ask a question below. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Assalamu alaikum. Peace to everyone else. And again, Ramadan Mubarak.